All right, let's open the case file on this one. What we're doing here is a full investigative debrief of a really pivotal, but maybe lesser-known UAP incident from 1997. And at the center of it is a U.S. Marine. This isn't just another UFO story. We're going to pick apart the anatomy of an encounter that raises some pretty huge questions about what's really flying around up there.
And let's start with the man himself. You hear those words and you know right away, this was not some distant, fuzzy light in the sky. This was a raw, terrifying, face-to-face confrontation. This quote, it just sets the stage perfectly for the reality of what went down. The stakes could not have been higher.
So, to really get this incident, you first have to get the witness. This part is absolutely crucial. Sgt Roderick Castle wasn't just some guy out in the desert. He was a trained, professional observer whose entire job revolved around understanding some of America's most advanced aircraft.
I mean, look at his credentials. As an aircraft ordnance technician with the Flying Nightmares, his whole world was the AV-8B Harrier jet. And if you know anything about planes, you know the Harrier is famous for one thing, its ability to take off and land vertically, to hover. He knew exactly what that technology should look, sound, and feel like.
And this is exactly why his testimony is so incredible. He knew, better than almost anyone, that for a Harrier to hover, it's a violent, deafening event. It's all directed thrust from a massive engine. But what he saw, it was the polar opposite. A huge object, just hanging in the air, perfectly still, in total and complete silence. For a guy like him, this wasn't just weird, it was impossible.
All right, let's go to the scene of the crime, so to speak. We're in the Southern California desert in 1997. A massive Marine Corps exercise is underway called the Hunter-Warrior Experiment. I mean, this was a huge deal. All sorts of units, experimental tactics. And you know what? It was also the perfect cover for something, well, something clandestine to be operating in the shadows.
So here's the play-by-play. It's about 2 a.m. Castle and his crash retrieval team get a call about unauthorized flares. Okay, no big deal. They drive their Humvee over a hill and bam, there it is, a colossal craft on the ground surrounded by armed men. They're immediately confronted, guns pointed right at them. Then the craft just takes off, no sound, and vanishes to the northwest at an impossible speed. And to top it all off, their Humvee is completely dead for several minutes. I mean, that is a textbook high strangeness event.
Now, let's do a proper forensic breakdown of the object itself. We're moving from the timeline of what happened to a real deep dive on the star of the show, this silent triangular craft.
The details here are just staggering. We are talking about a silent object the size of a football field, a perfect equilateral triangle but with rounded corners. No engines, no exhaust, no seams, no rivets, nothing. Its surface was this strange, matte black that just seemed to soak up light. And the lights, this is a huge detail. These 3 spherical orbs embedded in the corners, they didn't cast any light on the ground below them. Every single detail just screams technology that shouldn't exist.
So what could this possibly be? Well, the main theory for craft like this is something called an alien reproduction vehicle, or ARV. Now the key here is that this isn't necessarily an alien ship. The idea is that it's a human-made vehicle, but it's built by reverse engineering technology that is not human. Think of it like a hybrid, a bridge between our tech and something else.
And here's where this story really connects to the bigger UAP picture. Just look at this comparison. On the left, you have Castle's description from '97. On the right, you have the details of the infamous TR-3B, which really came into the public consciousness about a year later. The similarities in the size, the shape, the rounded corners, they're undeniable. Castle's concave center, it sounds a lot like the TR-3B's plasma accelerator ring. His side vents sounds a lot like vector vents. Is that just a coincidence? Or did Castle get a front row seat to one of the most secret programs in history?
But you know, the craft wasn't the only mystery out there in the desert that night. Let's pivot now because we have to talk about the other deeply unsettling piece of this puzzle, that highly organized, professional, and frankly terrifying team operating on the ground.
And we're not talking about a couple of guys standing guard. Castle's team was just a handful of Marines. They were confronted by a force of about 30 armed men. They were completely, totally outnumbered and outgunned. This was a massive show of force.
And everything about them was just sterile, unmarked. They had on all-black tactical gear, but no flags, no unit patches, no name tags, nothing. They were carrying submachine guns, driving blacked-out trucks, and get this, they spoke with American accents. They were aggressive, disciplined, clearly American, clearly military grade, but they didn't belong to any branch you could name. They were a ghost team.
So the craft is gone, the mystery men are gone. What happens next? Well, the official response was, in its own way, just as strange and just as revealing as the incident itself.
This is what their commanding officers told them when they got back. It's just some flare activity out there, guys. Can you even imagine hearing that after being held at gunpoint by a shadow special ops team standing under a silent football field-sized triangle? The absolute absurdity of that cover story just tells you how desperate they were to make this go away.
But it gets even stranger. The very next day, Castle's team, and only his team, was ordered to get an anthrax booster shot. It was mandatory, it was completely unexplained, and it was given to them while an armed guard stood watching. And here's the thing, Castle had already had all his shots. This booster was completely out of the ordinary. I mean, this just raises a million questions, right? Why the sudden booster shot? And why just them? Was it a threat? A way to intimidate them into silence? Was it some kind of medical tracker? Or was it something else entirely? Something related to an exposure we can't even begin to understand. It's this whole other layer of mystery on top of the cover-up.
Okay, let's start putting all these pieces together. We have the credible witness, the impossible craft, the ghost operators, and the bizarre cover-up. Now we can start to build a single, compelling theory about what Sgt Castle and his team actually stumbled upon that night.
First, you have to understand how something like this is even possible. The mechanism is called an Unacknowledged Special Access Program, or a USAP. These are the deepest of the black projects. They operate with money and oversight that are completely hidden from the regular government and military. If you don't have an absolute, undeniable need to know, then as far as you're concerned, that program literally does not exist. That's how you keep a secret this big.
And this is where it gets really compelling. Look at this. Castle's experience doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of a pattern. Look at Lance Corporal Harrier in 2009. Different craft, an octagon, but the same Black Ops team. And then Lance Corporal Wyant in 1997. A crashed UFO, and again, a Black Ops team. And what's the one weirdly specific thread that connects the aftermath of all three? An unexplained anthrax booster shot. This isn't a coincidence. It's a methodology. It's a signature.
And to add one more layer to this whole thing, years later, in 2002, Castle was actually approached for a job by Wirekinhut. That's a private security firm with known contracts at super-secret places like Area 51 and with Department of Energy special teams. Which makes you wonder, maybe those operators weren't military at all. Maybe they were private contractors, adding yet another layer of deniability to the whole operation.
So, here it is, the grand theory that it all seems to point to. A USAP was out in the desert field testing a triangular ARV. They were using the big Marine Corps experiment as cover, maybe even to test their craft's stealth systems against an active, unaware military force. But Castle's team stumbled upon them purely by accident and blew their cover. So the craft bugged out, heading northwest, right back towards the most restricted airspace in the country, near places like Edwards Air Force Base and China Lake, the heart of the Black Project world.
You know, for decades, this incredible story was kept secret. As Castle says right here, he was probably just going to take it to his grave. But the whole cultural shift we're seeing right now, all the new energy around this subject, the push for disclosure, that's what finally gave him the courage to come forward. And because he did, his testimony is no longer just a ghost story. It's a critical piece of historical evidence in a puzzle we're all trying to solve.
And really, this is the question that should leave you thinking. This technology, silent, massive, impossibly fast, it was working back in 1997. That's almost 30 years ago. So you just have to ask yourself, if that's what they had back then, what in the world are they keeping secret from us today?